Surreal Gerald Quinn as we continue our coverage of looking back on the Wire season one, episode three, the buys. As always, I am joined by one Robert Sapp. Robert Sapp, how you doing this? How you doing this afternoon?
You doing well. Happy Easter.
Yes, happy Easter to everybody out there. Woke up and felt different, of course, waking up and but it is still Easter. Was able to watch the service on online. That's the new reality. But you know, but with that being said, happy Easter to everybody out there. Hope everybody out there is being safe and enjoying. I saw the weather. It wasn't a little overcast, but still, you could went outside and hung out for a couple of with the family a bit. We are on episode three, the buys. This episode was directed by Peter Medak. Vulture ranked, and of course written by David Simon, Ed Burns. Vulture ranked this episode on their top Wire episodes of all time, 32 on the list of top Wire episodes of all time. So Vulture had this 32, had this 32 on their out of 60 Wire episodes. Excellent episode. We'll certainly get
Yeah, this was a good one.
this is when things started moving, and this is when your patience of the show started to pay off. So we'll begin. All right, we'll begin with, as of course, the epigraph of this episode was by D'Angelo Barksdale. It was the King stays it was the King stayed a king. That was the epigraph. Opening scene, you have Bodie versus D'Angelo in the pit. Bodie is, again, and this has been a constant theme throughout the course of the first three episodes. We know we know D'Angelo and Bodie are polar opposites. D'Angelo is trying to break down the Bodie after Bodie has basically ripped the Fiend for being a fiend. That's what drug fiends do. It doesn't matter how early it is. They want their drugs. They want their drugs 5 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., 9 a.m. It doesn't matter. So Bodie basically, gave a tongue lashing to a fiend who was trying to cop some drugs early. I guess it was 9 o'clock, somewhere a little bit before 9, and Bodie, rips into him. They're about to go through testing. Supposedly a new product, as we would come to find out, it was not a new product. So Bodie, basically brushes the fiend off. D'Angelo sees this and basically lets him know that, hey, it doesn't have to be done like this. Doesn't have to be done like this. And Bodie basically says, I don't know any other way. And you have Bodie, you have Wallace. Again, you have D'Angelo giving class to those two, but in particular Bodie. And when I looked at this scene, and it wasn't a very long scene, I thought I couldn't help but to think ahead in terms of what things to come. It's very difficult at times watching the show when you've seen all 60 episodes a zillion times to not think ahead. But the first thing I thought about when I watched this with D'Angelo was the word that came to my mind was reformation. And it seemed like he was similar. He was trying to reform the drug game in terms of how he was explaining that to both Bodie and Wallace during that scene. What was your thoughts on that opening scene?
Yeah, I mean, I really like this. It's the continuation, like you said, of it's D'Angelo trying to school young boys. He's trying to pass on his knowledge of the game and what it could potentially look like. At the same time, it's the questioning why they do the things that they could do, and if they could do it in a smarter way. So yeah, I really like the schooling the young boys aspect of it.
Yeah, he's trying to. I guess, for lack of a better term, but he's giving them trying to give them a more subtle approach a more subtle approach in terms of doing things. They have this mentality, especially Bodhi. Bodhi in particular has this mentality of he just wants to, and not to say Bodhi isn't smart, because we come to find out that Bodhi is street smart, but Bodhi is overly aggressive and the epitome of he's the epitome of being of a soldier. That's who Bodhi is. So Bubbles, as this scene is going on, Bubbles is up there with McNulty and Greggs, and he's taking not up there, but McNulty and Greggs are watching Bubbles take pictures of new Barksdale soldiers. He puts the hat on, the red hat on Bodhi, so now they know who Bodhi is. Of course, they already know D'Angelo, and the rest, I guess, whoever the others were not important. They took a hat. Matter of fact, they took a picture of Wallace, but I didn't see him put the red hat on Wallace. But I still think they took a picture of Wallace. So at this point, they probably added Wallace and Bodhi to that board in the basement.
They took a picture of everybody, but
yeah, they did. But yes, they did. But the hat
they outlined who the hats, what each hat meant.
Right.
And if you didn't get a hat, Wallace didn't, like, I don't even know if he got a hat.
Wallace didn't get the red hat. He got a hat.
The gray hat. It was the gray hat and it was the red hat. Red hat, that means you somebody. And then everything, if you don't get a hat, you nobody. If you do get a hat, that means you do something for the organization.
Yes. So they're taking the pictures. Following that, we go into the Commissioner Burrell's office with Valchek, Daniels, Major Forrester, and also the other Major, Bobby Reed. Now, important for this, we get introduced to a couple new characters. One we'll get to soon, but Stan Valchek, who grew to become one of my personal favorites. I loved Valchek's character over the season. Valchek, of course, is the father-in-law to one Presvelusky. They have a conversation. Of course, they're having a conversation prior in terms of what happened in the last episode with Presvelusky, Herc, and Carver in the pit or in the towers, and you could tell Daniels backs up Herc and Carver and Presvelusky reluctantly. He lies for him, says that he knew that they were doing field interviews at 2 a.m. and of course Valchek wants the lightest of penalties for one Presvelusky. He knows Presvelusky is a fuck up, but he just, that's his son-in-law. And so Valchek tries to come up with excuses in terms of why their punishment should be light. Again, you could tell Daniels throughout the course of the scene was annoyed, to say the least. And Burrell, Daniels thanks Valchek thanks Daniels for backing, for backing Presvelusky in particular. He probably care less about Herc and Carver. Presvelusky's his son-in-law, so he thanks him for backing him, and then Burrell lets Daniels know, why, how important Valchek is. Basically calls him a necessary evil in his main words. So what were your thoughts? And tells more importantly tells Daniels to wrap this case up, the Barksdale case up in roughly 3 weeks, street rips, and basically telling him to do the bare minimum, which has been a continuing theme over the course of the last couple of episodes. He's been telling them since the beginning that this case should keep this case nice and clean and simple. What were your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I'm gonna get to the scene. I just want to back up real quick. The beginning was the chess scene. They were playing chess in there, right?
No,
or is that later? Okay, all right, okay, all right. For some reason, I thought, I don't know. Anyways, okay, all right. I was waiting to get to that scene because I was like, oh wait, when we talked about it in the beginning, I was like, wait, did I mix those up? Was that part of the beginning?
And that wasn't
Bodhi and okay, all right, cool. That's why I was so light on that one, because I wanted to save it for the chess scene. All right, so in this scene, I mean, like the big thing, my big takeaway is, this is the organizational, this is the politics of it. This is the organizational BS, and it's the politics of everything, right? So it's like, in the last episode, we heard Marla Daniels, his wife, it's Marla, right? Um,
Yes, Marla.
yeah, Marla Daniels, his wife, say, this is a no-win, basically no-win situation. And so this is Daniels basically trying to figure out how to win at this situation. And the only way, at least as of right now, the only way it looks like he can win is by following the instructions of his superiors specifically, doing the exact thing that they're asking to do. And at the same time, because he says it, he's like, so I have suction with you now, Valchek. And Valchek says, that's what I'm saying. So that's the way that he can potentially win at this point in time. He follows the instructions of his supervisors or his direct superiors, and he also curries favor with Valchek for carrying Presbeluski through the whole crazy thing. That was a big part of that. No, this is the same one. That's the big part of that conversation of um did did your boys, like, was this something you told them to do? And he's like, and Daniels basically is like, if I say yes, it's on me. If I say no, it's on them, and I threw them under the bus. So yes, it's on me. And basically carries the water for the department, and that's his end with Belichick. So as we all know, in whatever profession we're in, there's the politics side of it or the bureaucratic side of it, and then there's like the political side, the different individual relationships that you gotta work to get whatever it is that you need to get done, and the procedures and processes you need to go through in order to, you know, um, do what your superiors ask or your bosses ask. So that's how I took this. This is just kind of like laying out like what that structure looks like and how James is trying to navigate it as of this time.
Yeah, I mean, we know from the beginning, from the start of this season, that Daniels has been a company man, and he is a company man up until this point. But you could start. I thought that in this scene, I thought you could start to see that Daniels um, wasn't happy, was starting not to get annoyed about being a company man. I thought that's what I thought I saw in this scene a little bit, that he really did not want to tell. He really didn't want to. He really hated to lie. He did not enjoy lying about that, as he did it reluctantly. So I think that Daniels, though he still has that mentality, chain of command, company, and we'll later find out with a scene of him and McNulty that he's still on that tip. But you can see some cracks in terms of him wanting to be that company man. So we go to, and I'm going to combine these scenes because I know they were separate, but they were separate, but really the same scenes. In terms of, we go inside the basement where the crew is at in regards to McNulty, Greggs, and company. It's episode 3. They have yet to have a photo of Avon Barksdale. They don't know what Avon, who's the kingpin. They don't even know what he looks like. So they send out McNulty, and this was a shot in the dark. McNulty sends out Polk and Mahone, the two humps, to go out and look for Avon Barksdale. Of course, that is a failure, and he's joking with Greggs. Greggs is like, "What do we really know about this dude? He's 31 years old. He has no priors, no flash. Doesn't has like talks about his girlfriends in different places. Girlfriend in New York, girlfriend here, girlfriend there." And then she describes, says likes to work out, including boxing. So when she says that, Lester Freeman's, the light bulb goes off in Lester Freeman's head. He hears that and immediately heads out. And as we all know, Freeman goes to a local boxing gym. They have a picture, and he finds a picture of Avon Barksdale, and he brings it back to the detail. And then I guess, now they realize that McNulty in particular realizes that, hey, this dude, has some game with him. He's maybe he might be real police after all. So they have a picture of one Avon Barksdale what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like you said, like there's a lot that's happened and seen, and it connects a lot of different things, or starts to open up different avenues. On the one end, it was Golden Gloves, and on the one end, you can see how smart Avon is in terms of his profile and not being someone. That's why he's on nobody's radar, because he's on nobody's radar. He makes sure he's on nobody's radar. That's why it's really hard to get a beat on him. So you kind of see the smartness of the person that you're dealing with on one end, and then on another end, kind of like you said, like at this point in time, McNulty sees Greg's, and you'll get into a later scene. McNulty sees Greg's as real police, but she's the only one that he sees as real police. But in particular, also Greg's doesn't know Lester at this point at all, like zero. And so what that does is when he comes back with the photo, that shows Greg's, because there's that scene where Lester like takes his coat off and puts it back up, and then kind of like Greg leans back and looks over at him, and it's like, huh. And that's kind of like the audience's clue in, like, oh, okay, all right, this Lester might have some game to him. He might not be the hump like the other guys are. So it's kind of like opening up that frame of reference as well.
Yeah, which I would think would have to motivate them that much more between Greg's and McNulty in terms of doing this case. I would think that was like, okay, we got now. It'd be like if somebody, it'd be like we're both sports fans. It'd be like, you know, getting a trading for an all-star or something. All right, we got some more weapons that we can go after this championship with. So I think I would have to think that, you know, that they would have to be now that much more motivated to do this case, because it really, you know, you really think about it, through the first 2.5 episodes of this, it's basically been McNulty and Greg's. It's basically been their show. I know they got Signer. You know, Signer's come in a little bit, but you know, we hadn't got to know him too much. But as far as the original detail, you know, Presbylewski, we know Presbylewski, Herc, and Garver, we know they're not respected. Daniels is looked upon as a company man. You got the two humps, the two old dudes who are not, obviously they're a joke. So so it's basically McNulty. It basically has been a McNulty Greg show. Greg has that look, like you said, has that look like, yeah, we might have something here. She doesn't all the way know Freeman, you know, Freeman's story, but she did, you know, she was, it definitely piqued her interest more so when he came out with that picture. Yeah, as far as Avon, again, yeah, no flash, none of that. Even when you saw him dressing the first couple episodes, he'd have a sweatsuit on, he's sitting upstairs in the club, he's not like, you know, like basically no one outside the street knew who he was. And, you know, again, that just shows the brilliance of you know, how smart he was. Now we get to, you know, what you've been waiting for, the chess scene. So you have Wallace and Bodie. Now there's something very important that's said before the chess scene that I noticed today. You have Wallace and Bodie sitting down playing checkers on a chessboard. Before D'Angelo even gets into the chess, you know, talking about the chess and breaking it down, they mention, Bodie mentions it, that the product is weak, and that these fiends is getting agitated. These fiends are agitated. Our product is weak. It was very quick, but I thought very important. Very important. I thought would lead to a lot of foreshadowing, you know, some foreshadowing there. So Bodie, of course, laughs at him for playing checkers on a chessboard, but these are some, you know, these are some project youngsters that don't know any better. He begins to he begins to break down the game and compare it to the street. And they are, you know, after complaining the first minute or so, about him switching up their game, I thought that they were really into it. Once he brought the game down to the street level, comparing Stringer to as being a queen, Avon being the king, and basically told them, and you'll go deep into it. Basically told them, y'all is a bunch of pawns. Y'all are a bunch of pawns. And he, you know, Bodie asked, hey, you know, can you become the king? Can I? So if I get the other king, get to the other side of the board, and get the other person's king, I become the king. And Bodie and D'Angelo like, no, the king stays the king. You don't like that. That's not how the game works. And he says the pawns get capped out quick. And Bodie, of course, retorts, unless there's some smart ass pawns. And again, one of the signature iconic scenes of the entire 60 episode series. This was again one of the best scenes that you'll ever see in television. It's how deep that scene was. I have some thoughts about it, but I know you want to go in on it. Go ahead.
Yeah. This is the whole show. And as you were sitting here talking about it, I was thinking about our conversation last week when we were relating the scene that Daniels and his wife had at the kitchen table to the epigraph. The epigraph last week was
You can't lose if you don't play.
There you go. You can't lose if you don't play, and that's what they were talking about. And now the epigraph for this episode is King Stay the King, and this scene is completely tied to that epigraph. So I'll be interested going forward to now look at the epigraph and then try to spot the specific scene that's related to it. It just kind of like dawned on me as you were talking. I don't know if I ever connected those as thoroughly in my mind as to when you were talking. But yeah, man, this scene is fantastic. I mean, like it is. They're laying out the entire drug game as seen by the Wire in this scene. And the great thing about it is D'Angelo doesn't say this is Stringer, this is Avon, right. You're the pawns. They catch on to that. And as we know as educators, that's how the best learning happens, is when you lead the group to a place, but then they're the ones who have the ahas. Like that's the best type of learning. So like I thought that was just like expertly done. As we know, David Simon, the creator of the show, is a reporter and somebody who spent a lot of times on those high-end investigators. And David Burns, the co-creator, is a former cop and teacher. And so like it makes sense that's how they would break that scene down. And so on one level you have the kind of like the detail of teaching somebody how to play chess. And I think both of us have done that. I know I've done that plenty of times with the kids, trying to teach them how to play chess and trying to articulate like the different movements and why different pieces moved away. And so then the genius of this scene is then to add on that the way in which these pieces move are related to their positions of importance. And then they can relate it to the positions of importance in their own life. And I think it's really telling to everybody's personality in that scene as to like what position that they play and how that can give us an inside viewpoint of where they or keep us on point with where they'll be going throughout this season. D'Angelo's basically explaining how everything moves, and is kind of like articulating the game to them Bodie's hyper focused on the pawns and how the pawn makes it to being the king. And I found it so funny that Wallace is just basically smiling and happy to be there the entire time.
Yeah.
So it's just like you can see like what D'Angelo doesn't actually want to be a part of the game. He never identifies himself as one of the pieces. So he's kind of like the narrator of how the game is, both the chess game that they're talking about and the narrator of kind of like this game on that they're all involved in. Bodie, to your point, is a soldier. He is hyper focused on what is it that I need to do to get to the top. Like, what is it that I need to do to get there? Which is why he's so focused on the pawn, because of course he identifies that he's a pawn right now. He's just a soldier out in the street. They make that connection one-on-one. And Wallace, poor Wallace. Wallace he's just there. He's just there, happy to be there, smiling throughout life, identifying, that's strength. That's like Stringer. He's just happy to be able to be involved in the conversation. But he also doesn't identify himself as any piece on that board, which lets you know that maybe he's not long for this game. But he also can't articulate anything about the game itself, other than just to be happy to be there and to identify that Stringer is like the queen. So I mean, it works on multiple levels. Honestly, we could do a whole entire episode just on this scene. It's brilliant.
No, the scene is
possible.
It is a very layered scene. I thought a couple of things. I thought that it is not by accident that they identify that D'Angelo is not identified in that as anything on this in terms of one of the pieces. That's definitely not by accident. You hear Stringer, you hear Stringer's name, you hear Avon's name, and those are the guys. Those are the top dogs. Those are the top dogs. You have Avon, Stringer. I thought I thought D'Angelo was trying to send a subtle message, maybe to Wallace, maybe not. As far as he put a lot of emphasis on that, the pawns get killed off quick, get capped off quick. But he was very emphatic on in terms of making that statement. So maybe I'm reaching a little bit, but it seemed to me like he was trying to. I don't know. He knows he's not gonna scare Bodie, but maybe this was like kind of the beginning of him and Wallace connecting, and basically maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching from that standpoint, but he put a lot of emphasis on the pawns. Get capped off quick.
Well, if anything, they're all pawns, and so I mean, he's basically in so many words saying, everything is about protecting the king. So if you're not the king, you're expendable.
Yes.
The only other person that he identifies as being able to make significant moves is the queen, who they've already linked to Stringer. And the rook is the package. And then they don't go into any other detail on the other pieces other than the pawn. So the implication is everybody else is basically a pawn.
Yes.
And the pawns are expendable. They get capped quick.
It is, just a brilliant scene, and one of the most iconic scenes in the history of the show, without question. So we find out that Santangelo, who's also a part of detail, is giving information to Ross. He's the informant for Ross, and he's the one that's just telling Ross basically everything about what's going on or what's not going on, because up until that point, really not much was going on within the detail. But he gives Ross information on McNulty and Greg's, and basically at this point he doesn't have much to give them. Ross, basically in this, classic Ross basically says, you'll have a favor at the end of this. I need your eyes and ears on this, so that McNulty, I need to be one step ahead of McNulty, because knowing he knows McNulty well, of course. and we find that out. Did you take anything out of that?
I mean, Rawls is playing games right now, and Santangelo is conflicted. You know, even though nobody is a big fan of McNulty right now, he's still a cop, and he's not one of the bosses, and so it's like you're in that catch-22. Santangelo's in that catch-22 situation. You can see how, like, that's why he's saying, at least in my mind, that's why he's saying, bring me home, take me out of this situation. Like, I don't want to spy on my fellow officer, but Ross doesn't care about that.
Ross,
He wants the information.
Ross is not one for sentiment at all. Yeah, Ross could care less.
I mean, if we go back to the chess analogy, then and then we apply it to the police department, then all the detectives and everybody who's not, Rawls the Burrell are pawns as well.
Yes.
And so he's a pawn.
Yeah, he's a
just
pawn.
Be playing like that. He's being played like that.
So we get introduced to Mr. Omar as his crew is scoping the pit. They notice the stash being moved. One of the few times that I ever heard Omar curse. Maybe it might have been the only time where he's actually cursed in the series. So he comes out, basically says this, this is sloppy. You see his other guy, you have three of them. Him, Brandon, and Bailey. You have Bailey. Bailey's a dark-skinned dude who's taking notes. Who's taking notes on saying it was the third door to the left, or he said third door to the right, in terms of they were able to identify where the stash was at. And you see Omar's in a white van, and we immediately know that this is somebody. You immediately know that this is somebody who is smart and knows what he's doing. He's scoping it out. He's playing. He's to get back to the chess thing, he's kind of trying to see what move he's going to make next in terms of the chess. So, what were your thoughts on the introduction of one Omar Little?
It's Omar. Yeah. I mean, like, it'll come up later, but I'm not like the juxtaposition of Omar looking at everything and how it goes versus the police and looking at everything and how it goes. The police are like, we can't identify anything, basically. And Omar is like, this is so sloppy. He sees the whole entire picture immediately. Of course, they have two different ends and outcomes. So,
right.
Admittedly on that, but I think the juxtaposition is interesting in there and just shows kind of like the calculating mind that Omar has.
Yes. Having his guys taking notes and what have you, and it was great. It was great just seeing how his mind works, and that was his first appearance of the series. So we go to D'Angelo and Stringer. D'Angelo goes up to see Stringer. Now, I noticed something very subtle. Even before D'Angelo enters the room, you have Stinkum on the staircase. And as D'Angelo's walking, first D'Angelo looks at the girl who he would later, of course, have a conversation with, Charlene. He looks at her as she's dancing. Then he walks up the steps. Stinkum gives the heads up. Hey, D'Angelo's on the way, which again just speaks to the organization of just how these guys operate day in and day out. So he sends D'Angelo. D'Angelo goes into the office, a padded, locked office with Stringer. They're counting the money. And D'Angelo almost seemingly was in awestruck of how much money was being counted, and before he even basically says without an immediate response, says, where does it all go? He gives Stringer a cut, not a cut, but he gives Stringer the money that they made in the pit. Stringer, they made about 22,000. Stringer's obviously is impressed by that, and he rewards D'Angelo for for making that money. Basically, gives him a attaboy, and says to D'Angelo complains about the product, and Stringer basically laughs like, the product says, not laughs, but says the product is weak everywhere. A fiend is going to be a fiend. They're going to get high no matter what. This is, and to paraphrase, this is forever. Like this drug thing is forever. He had a quote. It was a quote, and I directly quoted it somewhat. He says, "This is Stringer. We do worse and get paid more. The government does better, and it doesn't matter." I thought that was a key quote in that particular scene. So D'Angelo gets rewarded. Stringer gives him the reward for gives him, I don't know, give him a couple $1,000, and that scene ends with D'Angelo with Stringer basically saying, "Close the door." What were your thoughts on the dynamic, that exchange between D'Angelo and Stringer?
Yeah, I mean, they're two. You said it. There are two important, huge moments in that scene in my mind. One is the question like that D'Angelo asked is like, where does all the money go? Now, to me, that's important for a bunch of different reasons. The first reason just being that's just kind of like showing the intellect of D'Angelo. I think for a long time, the position on D'Angelo was that he was mentally weak. And I would argue against that. And I think this is the beginning point where I would argue against that, would just be that D'Angelo was not a soldier. That's different from being weak. Because
Yes.
nobody else goes in there and
Ask that question.
So he's thinking bigger. He's just thinking. He's thinking, not just accepting what is. Which in my mind's eye is a big position of strength. And so that's one dynamic to his character. The second thing is, when we go back to that chess analogy, is there's a much bigger picture that, of course, we'll eventually find out throughout the series of what they do with their money. But like it might have just been the mood that I was in when I was watching it, but it was just kind of like, in my mind's eye, I just kept thinking like, the extension to that question is, for all this death and destruction and everything that this is causing, there's a bunch of people in here counting up money. What is that all? What does this all mean? What is this for? So it's a larger existential question as well. And then I think the third thing is just kind of like the way that Stringer kind of like didn't answer the question was very telling.
No, he never answered the question.
No. He didn't answer the question. It was very telling, but the look on his face and just kind of like the way he kind of like laughed, like, yeah, that's in my mind, I kind of like took it as, yeah, that's a businessman. That's somebody of like-minded mentality. And so like, there's always been this thought in my mind of how D'Angelo is a microcosm of Stringer Bell. He's on a lower level of Stringer right now, but just as you spoke to earlier, D'Angelo speaks about reform, but he speaks about it from a place of no power, essentially. So all he can do is just have these conversations with kids about what the drug game could potentially look like. Stringer will have those conversations at much higher levels eventually. So anyway, so that always has been in my mind. And then when I was looking at that scene, I saw Stringer just kind of like nod his head and smile. I was like, yeah. Stringer can feel that connection as well. And then the second part, no, that was it. Yeah, okay, because we didn't get into anything else. So yeah, that's kind of like the no. It was that question, and then what was the second thing? There was a second point that you brought up.
No, this is what Stringer is breaking down the game, not the game, but breaking down when D'Angelo was complaining about the product.
That's right. When he
goes to government.
Yeah.
He says, I'll give you the quote. He says,
Yep.
we do worse and get paid more.
Mm-hmm.
Government does better, and it doesn't matter.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, like that's a huge one as well. I mean, it stands for a bunch of different things in my mind's eye. When I keep it just specifically to what's going on in that specific episode, what he's essentially saying is it doesn't matter what our product looks like, tastes like. The worse we do product wise, the more money we'll make because we'll sell twice as more. And it doesn't matter how hard the government comes at us or what it does. Like that speaks to the game in itself. The game is dictated by the wants and needs of people, of humanity. And as much as humanity, as much as drug fiends in this case want the product, it will never, ever, 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 ever cease. On a much larger scale, it's talking about the war on drugs, right? Like, and how the what in the last, I think it was in the last episode when it says it's a war that will never end. And that's the reason why it's a war that will never end. You can pick up street dealers all the live long day, but that does nothing to abate humans' want for drugs. And so like both of those, they're very tangible pieces in the room of what they're talking about, but they're also much, much larger theories of the entire drug game and how police districts in the country as a whole views the war on drugs.
Oh, you go
at that time.
You weren't here for episode 1, but I mentioned episode 1. Go back to episode 1 with the quote from Carver. He says when he's in the office with Kima and Hurt, he says you can't call this shit as a war.
That's war's end. Yep, that was it. Sorry.
Like that.
Yep.
That scene to this scene is perfect.
Yep, that was number 1. You're right.
So from there on, we find out, we already knew, Signer is undercover. McNulty has gotten him Signer goes undercover. McNulty gets the equipment from Agent Fitz. Fitz, of course, has something to tell McNulty, but doesn't tell, which we will later find out, doesn't tell it in front of Kima. And we said when you mentioned Daniel's name was mentioned, he put his head down and got quiet on from that standpoint. But he does give Kima and McNulty the equipment for to go undercover, light mics and what have you, so Signer could go undercover. Signer, we kind of skipped over this a little bit. Signer, of course, is berated by Bubbles for not being up to par for being a fiend. Bubbles is the ultimate fiend, and Signer is working with Bubbles. They're in the pit, and they basically Signer is saying, hey, basically how that they're getting nothing. Like nobody's important who's giving up the product or the money exchange, and basically how well organized it's run. Like they don't give the money and the product at the same time. Kind of frustrated that they're not getting anything out. At that point weren't getting anything out of it. They're standing, of course, Signer and Bubbles are standing by the van with Kima and McNulty. And that, of course, that was the perspectives that you were talking about earlier, that the cops see, hey, we can't, there's nothing to get out of this right now, versus, and then I thought following the cops saying that, they flashed to Omar and show Omar's band. So that, I thought that was kind of like a great transition from that standpoint. But again, Signer says there's nothing that we can get out of here right now, other than some hand-to-hands, and of course nobody important is down there. No top dogs are down there, of course. And you had that, and then of course we move on to. Do you have anything to add to that?
So much. So
Go
much.
ahead. I figured.
Um, really quick, are we doing the MVP for this episode?
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna do that at the end. So I
Yeah.
should save it. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So I'll put it.
Say the
Okay.
MVP.
All right. Okay. So then this is how I'll attack this particular scene. So I related back to this. I was waiting until we got to this one to fully flesh out the idea. So yeah, between Omar and the police, one could say there are two different objectives, right? Omar is completely tracking the stash so that he can rob them. The police are tracking everybody's movements so they can build a case. So I acknowledge that on one end, two different outcomes. But the point that you made about then how they drive off and Omar is clocking them as well shows how Omar sees the entire field. I would argue that this scene, especially juxtaposed with how Omar was clocking the whole operation, shows that the police at this point in time, to McNulty's, credit, and what he's saying about the investigation are basically uh so many different analogies that are not appropriate, are basically just um poking around in the dark. They don't know what they're doing. They're not trying to actually accomplish a goal anyway. And so all you need is a crew that is functionally competent, and it looks like a master class to the police. Whereas Omar, who is a master at what his craft, what he does, robbing drug dealers. I think this episode kind of like sets that up, and these scenes set that up. Looks at that crew and says they're raggedy and they're amateur, because he knows what he's looking for. He knows what his end goal is, whereas the police do not. Even though there would be an argument, they have different goals. So that immediately came to my mind, and it then is cemented in the fact that then Omar even sees what the police are doing and sees how shoddy their operation is, and he's not concerned at all about robbing the
No.
crew, even though he knows they're being surveyed by the
Yeah.
police.
No, he was not the least bit concerned about the police at all. I don't even think you didn't even mention him. So no, he was not he was absolutely not concerned about him. And to your point, it it just showed like the police are still trying to find their way. You still have it. You still have Daniel. It's not all the way in. At this point, we still don't know. They fully don't know what Freeman is capable of. They still have Presby Lucy and those. They still have a bunch of 3 or 4 clowns on the detail. So the police. You're right. The police are still trying to find what are we doing here.
And as the viewers, we have that information, but Omar, the character, doesn't have that information. He doesn't know who's on the detail and what they're doing, but he can see, just like he can see at this point in time, he doesn't know he doesn't know the extent of the Barksdale operation, but he can see what he sees in that terrace. And he sees this, it's an easy way to get that money. Just as he can see that the police are of no worry and no concern because of the way that they're doing. Omar's clocking everybody's movements and their interactions and what they're doing. He has no knowledge of anybody's backstory at this point in time, not even Barksdale like that at this point in time. He's clocking off of how everybody's moving and his movements and what everybody's presenting, their actions are presenting their easy target, as we will find out in the end, in terms of the stash, and then B, the police are not to be worried about because they are the worst at this point in time.
So we go from there to McNulty and Perlman. McNulty knocks on her door. He's asking her whether or not he asks her how to clone a beeper. She, of course, doesn't give him the runaround, but basically tells him you have to go through a lot of different channels and paperwork to do so, and you got to go through a chain of command as far as in terms of with Daniels. in terms of Daniels. They end up sleeping together. But I thought that besides their own personal relationship, that the most important part of their exchange was of him asking to how to clone a beeper, which of course, again, we will get to soon enough in further episodes. But that was McNulty. I think McNulty asking how to clone a beeper, he's already thinking, maybe to a lesser extent than Omar, not a much lesser, but a certain lesser extent than Omar. I think McNulty kind of sees the big picture a little bit in terms when he asked that question in terms of how to clone a beeper. What were your thoughts on him with that statement and with him asking that?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's also after he walks out on after Daniels tells the skeleton crew there, him, Greggs, and McNulty, McNulty, Greggs, and Prespaluski, that they're gonna go in for arrest. And so what this does is set up the McNulty character, right? Like there's three things we know about McNulty at this point. One is that he hates authority. That is without question. Two is that he will do whatever is necessary for his case.
Yes.
And then three, that he is a smart detective. And so there are obvious self-destructive tendencies that are presenting himself. I mean, they're not obvious. There's subtle self-destructive tendencies that are presenting themselves, but we don't know where that's going to go at this point.
Right.
And so that's why I just left it to those three things right there. So that's what this scene accomplishes, right? Like A, it doesn't matter what the lieutenant or any of the bosses tell him. He's going to do what he's going to do. B, he's all about his case, and to your point, he can see what is needed for this case because in his eye, the end goal is Barksdale. It's not how many arrests they get. It's not like da-da-da. His goal is Barksdale. In order to get Barksdale, he knows they have to get way, way above the street level. And the only way that's going to happen is, in his mind, through different technology that he goes into in this episode. And then B, he uses his relationship with Ronnie, as he calls her, to get the information he needs to push his case forward.
Yes. So we go to the stash house. D'Angelo leaves the stash house for a food run. So he leaves the stash house for a food run, and Omar robs the stash house. Had it perfectly timed, dead to rights. Stinkum gets punched in the face. Tinkum gets punched in the face. Assumingly, they bust in. He asks Sterling, where it at. Repeats it twice. Then shoots Sterling. Then the younger dealer gives up the stash to Omar. Brandon accidentally calls Omar's name out, and Omar, of course, responds. Omar gets annoyed by that, and you have them being robbed as they're pulling off in the white van. You have D'Angelo returning back with the food as they're driving away with the white van. Prior to them getting robbed, you had Stinkum basically saying, "We up in 10 minutes." So again, example of how things have to be, how things are with the Barksdale organization in terms of, clocking certain situations, and how on time they have to be in terms from how it's run. You had that going on, but Omar hits the stash, gets off clean, and you have them, you have the Barksdales, licking their chops, not licking their chops, but basically licking their tails as one of them shot, one of them beat up, and D'Angelo has no answers because he was getting a food run on a food run. What were your thoughts on this scene in terms of how it was executed by one Omar?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a statement and then I have a question for you. So my statement is that, I mean, like it's it's showing us exactly what we've been talking about Omar, how calculated he is, how he can see the whole kind of layout and everything that's going on, how he notices everybody's actions. So he knew exactly when to hit the safe house, and he knew exactly how to hit the safe house. He had watched their movements, and he identified like a perfect time to do it. And identified, once D'Angelo left to go get food, that was a perfect time to move in because there was nobody that would see them and be able to alert the muscle. So all of that reaffirms that for Omar. I want to make it clear this is purely in a fictional sense, but I had this thought for the first time ever. Yeah, first time ever. Again, purely in a fictional sense, in these characters, should Omar, this is my question, should Omar, once the young boy said his name, should he have killed everybody in that room?
No. And I'll say, because to me, if he does that, he draws, now you have about you have about four homicides, four bodies.
A lot of homicides, yeah.
So,
like 5 of them in there.
Or at least 5, yes, 5. Yes, Stinkum, Bodie, Sterling, the young boy, that's 4. Yeah. 4 of them, yeah. No. And I don't even think, not only he should not have shot all of them, but I don't think he shouldn't have killed one of them. I thought him. No, he didn't kill anybody. No, he shot the boy. No, that was perfect. That was perfect because at that point, I think that he would have had. I think he had to shoot the dude for them to give up the stash.
No, that part fine, but after his name is said, then it's kind of like in all like the different like mob movies and everything like that, right? All the different like heist movies, everything like that. No witnesses. No one can say his name to anybody. So that just popped into my head. I was like,
I mean, it's a fair question. It's a fair question, but we will get in later episodes. We'll get to why he was annoyed by his name being said.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
I mean, but it's obvious why he's. I mean, like we don't even have to wait. Like it's obvious. Like we know the ramifications of that, but it's obvious in the moment to the viewer why he would be upset that he said his name. They are robbing a drug crew.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You don't want your name said.
Yeah,
and so they don't know who you are. Period.
Yeah, his boy slipped. His name should not have been said. Right.
No. Yes, absolutely.
His name should not have been said.
I mean, I could push back on it in my own question in a lot of ways. Like I said, this literally just occurred to me as I watched it this time around. Knowing the character that Omar evolves to is probably against his code. And so that's probably the easy answer. To your point, that's a lot of bodies. That's a lot of bodies. Yeah, and so that's a lot of bodies. Yeah. That will attract a lot of attention.
Yes.
So
we're not just talking about Barstow attention. We're talking about police.
No, I know. Yeah, it attracts a lot of attention. So would it be not having your name out there initially? Would it be worth it versus the amount of attention you'll draw to having 5 dead bodies?
I'm sure.
It's probably not worth it.
Omar is a genius, a savant. I'm sure he calculated those odds in his mind. I'm sure he thought about as soon as his name was said that, damn, am I going to kill everybody in this room? I'm sure that crossed his mind. But Omar being, it's kind of like when LeBron James processes information on the court on a play. All right, what's the best move? What's the best play? Should I take it to the hoop or I got a 3-point shooter who shoots 60% from the corner? Like all that, those type of savants process all that information. And Omar to me is not any different in terms of what his trait. He's a savant. He processes all. He's a chess master. He sees all of that. I'm sure that crossed his mind, but he made the right decision in not killing everybody and not killing anybody for that matter. Because remember, they don't. The cops don't care about the cops don't care about drug dealers getting robbed.
Yep.
They care less.
Nope.
But the bodies would be a whole.
Yep.
And getting back and going, we can go back to last episode when McNulty's talking to Bodie and D'Angelo, or maybe that was episode 1, whatever. He said, just sell your shit and keep it moving. He's like, I don't really care about the fact that you sell drugs. It's about the bodies.
Right. He's a homicide detective.
He's a homicide detective.
He
right.
cares about the bodies.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
very true.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair question, and I know, again, knowing Omar, even
I'm gonna come back to this question when we get further. When we get a few episodes down. Yeah, I'm gonna come back to this question.
No, it's coming back. That question that's coming back.
Yep.
So again, the stash house gets robbed. They get away, and the next day, you have, of course, and I know I'm jumping ahead of the scene, but the scene it connects with this scene. You have Weebay basically, giving D'Angelo an earful, basically saying like, look, man, we got $20,000 in the house, and you are making a food run. Like, you're making us look weak. He said we look like a bunch of bees. We gotta come back on them. And Bodie, not surprisingly, heard the name Omar and said, that's the name I heard. And D'Angelo tried to retort and say, I saw a white van, and but that served no purpose, because it didn't serve no purpose. But I'm saying, it was no plates or whatever. I guess he didn't see that part. So he said he saw the white van. You have Bodie saying, I heard the name Omar, and that was the key part of that Weebay D'Angelo scene, of the fact that Omar's name is now on the street.
Yep.
So we have Daniels, McNulty, and the detail about to go on this pointless raid, which we all know is pointless. Daniels in his heart knows it's pointless. McNulty refuses to go. He says, I'm not going to go on this raid when it's not going to add to the case. Daniels talks to him in private, basically says, you should have called in sick. They go at it for a couple minutes. They get to the raid with no McNulty. And of course they get nothing. The stash has been moved. They get nothing. Bodie, and we kind of saw this coming, because they kept flashing back to Bodie when the cop is talking to him, and Bodie punches Mahone, knocks Mahone down, and then proceeds to get the shit beat out of him by about 4 cops. Which, by the way, I had never seen anything like that on television in 2002. Like, we saw the Rodney King in real life and what had happened with that, but I'd never seen anything like that up until that point. I can't speak for you, of course, but I had never seen cops beating on a dude like that on network television, definitely not on network television. So that was something that was different from that standpoint. He knocks down the cop. Greggs and Carver and 2 other cops just beat the living daylights out of Bodie. And there you go, of course, with that scene. Of course, all of this was for nothing, because they got nothing. And even Greggs says, we have shit to show for this, which we knew was going to happen. What are your thoughts on that scene and that raid and that McNulty Daniels?
Yeah. I mean, no. I mean, I think it's a lot of character building or setting up. The Daniels McNulty scene sets up how defiant McNulty can be, so how much he can't stand any boss at all, and also sets up he won't do anything to how much he'll do for his case and how much he stands in his beliefs. And so that's one part, and then the second part is the raid itself shows how normal police tactics are not going to get this done. They're just not going to get this done. And if they continue to try to do it by normal police tactics, it's just not going to work. So what do?
Yeah.
That's what I took from the scene.
Yeah, and of course, we can always go back to this. Compare the execution of the police raid versus the execution of Omar's raid and his robbery, and they are polar opposites. So that I thought that was telling as well. Final scene before.
Oh wait, real quick, want to go back. Weebay giving it to D'Angelo.
Yes, go ahead.
That was that really stood out in my mind this time, thinking about again that comparison to him and Stringer Bell, just D'Angelo being on a lower level. It kind of reminded me of a scene like that'll come up with between Stringer Bell and Barksdale and Avon in a couple of seasons. I won't dig into that. But what Weebay was saying to him was, like, it doesn't matter what you thought was going to happen in terms of muscle and how the re-up is supposed to run. It only matters what happens, which juxtaposes what we're talking about with Omar, who all he deals in is what is happening, the actions of the people and what is going on in that moment. He scopes out a scene. He looks at how everything runs, and then he goes, and then to your point, he then makes the adjustments in real time. D'Angelo, with all of his high concept thinking, which is great if you're a professor and you're talking about theory, but there's an actual practice to all of everything that's going on. And so, yeah, you can come in to the office, Stringer Bell, with $20-something thousand and ask where the money's going and has this higher level thinking, but you also, in order to be successful, need to be out there clocking the movements of everybody else to make sure your stash doesn't get robbed. And it doesn't matter what anybody else did, that's on you. And so it was funny to me, to your point, no one actually said Omar. Bodie was the one who was like, when Weebay's giving it to D'Angelo, he's like, well, I heard the name Omar. Weebay looks over to him and starts talking to him. D'Angelo starts trying to say something. Weebay gets right back on him. And then immediately Bodie's like, and I saw the white van. And then D'Angelo like, yeah, I saw the white van too. And Weebay immediately starts going on D'Angelo. So it's like the opposite. I mean, it's kind of like the opposite scenes. Like in Weebay's world, the actual tangible things matter. Like in terms of the information that Bodie gave means way more than the fact that D'Angelo brought $22,000 into Stringer Bell and has that crew clicking. So like that nod and that smile by Stringer Bell earlier on may have given D'Angelo a like, attaboy.
Yeah.
He's knocked way down when the stash gets took, and actually Bodie moves up levels because he had the key details.
Yeah.
He had the key details of who it was and what they were driving. So I just found that interesting, all in that little bit of a scene. You could pull all that apart.
No question about it. And basically, Weebay ripping D'Angelo because he's like, dude, you are in a position of leadership. You're not. He's ripping him for not being a leader. You're the leader of the pit. This is bad leadership on your hands. So I don't.
Well, it's two, and that's what I was saying. Like it's two forms of leadership. You're absolutely right. And then you get into the duality of it, right? Like, so from Avon's perspective, not Avon, Stringer's perspective, he's showing great leadership because he's bringing in more money than they expected.
Right.
Great leadership.
Yeah.
From WeWay's perspective, not great leadership because you weren't here when the stash got robbed. Which one means more? Right? Like with and the answer is you need to have it all.
Yes.
In order to be that king that they were talking about. That's the answer. And as much as, and this is the foreshadowing that you're talking about, as much as D'Angelo might possess that other style of leadership that Stringer Bell acknowledges, he doesn't possess that on the ground leadership of where he is, and the reality of his situation, which does not mean you're going to have a great future. But that's that type of leadership.
So we'll get to the last scene and then, of course, MVPs and final grades. Last scene, McNulty and Greggs, not Greggs, it's McNulty goes to Fitz. Fitz lets McNulty know that Daniels is dirty. Of course, he didn't want to tell her in front of because he knew Greggs. I think knew Greggs works with McDaniels, not McDaniels, but Daniels. Lets him know he had about $100,000 in liquid assets. Gives him some background stuff on Daniels that McNulty didn't know. Of course, didn't know, or even would be privy to, for that matter. And so you have some now McNulty. Now you have to think that this adds even more questions in McNulty's head about Daniels wanting to go through with this case. Now, at this point, would have to think that he just has zero trust for Daniels from this thing, finding out this piece of information. Real quick on this, because we got a few minutes, and I want to get to MVP, the MVP of the episode.
Okay, so since we'll be real quick on it, then I just have more questions about this one. This is one of those threads I've always wondered about that we'll just continue to revisit. Because he says he's dirty, says all these things,
right?
But as I think about the series as a whole, in this case, I can't ever remember there actually being any type of answer to this. So this is something that we could just continually revisit. So right now, the question is out there, is Daniels dirty?
Right. I mean, at that point, I'm thinking about, I have to fight hard not to think about upcoming seasons. I got the sense when I originally first saw this that he at that particular time, in present day, was not dirty, but back in the day that he had did some stuff. And it kind of went, and he kind of played the game and he had played the game that didn't get him exposed, but I didn't think he was presently still dirty. That's what I thought, and when I first initially saw this episode originally, and even now to a lesser extent.
There's a lot to unpack in this.
There's a lot to unpack.
We'll do this part later. There'll be many opportunities to come back to this question. But to your point, it's just there's now this in McNulty's mind. This now gives him
leverage.
Not even like gives him the permission to be like F Daniel.
Yes. To go full rogue. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No question about it. Because beforehand, McNulty's like, oh, this dude is squeaky clean. So maybe I do need to walk color inside the lines a little bit. But now, at this point, McNulty's like, you know what? F it. I'm going full rogue, and I'm gonna do it my way. So I agree with you from that standpoint. MVP of the episode, first of all, I gave a quick grade. I gave the episode grade A. With the chess scene, the introduction of Omar, a lot of just jewels and nuggets throughout the course of the episode as we discussed. I gave Lester Freeman, the MVP for finding Avon Barksdale.
Yeah. I mean, it's an A grade. I mean, of course, it's the introduction of Omar. Like you don't introduce a character like that and not have an A grade on the episode, and for all the different things that we focus. My MVP, is Bubbles, Andre Royal. Um, this was a good episode for him, man. This was a good episode for him. Every scene he was in, he was crushing it. And then going back to the scene where you're talking about, like where literally it was like Kima Bubbles, and it was his show. I mean, he took that thing, he took that thing apart. Um, brick by brick, and then of course the dead soldiers line and everything like that. I mean, and then yeah. I mean, like that's the memorable scene, but every part he played in this episode was perfect, and I think that shifted. This is definitely, I remember it happening in real time, and then I also in seeing it. This is definitely the shift from, oh, Bubbles is just the guy that comes up with a clever plan to Bubbles is like he's a high value informant, like really high value informant. Even McNulty says it's like, Bubbles, why, if you have all this wisdom,
Why
and
is your life so bad?
right, but the key point of that is the wisdom part of it.
Yes.
That McNulty used with the word wisdom with Bubbles, and in terms of everything that we're saying with Omar and with D'Angelo, and to certain extent, but particularly with Omar, Bubbles sees he sees the field, he sees the entire thing.
Picture. Yes, he sees the big picture.
Yeah, he sees all the movements, and so in two big parts, it's like that scene, and then at the very end, he doesn't say anything, but he's out there, and he catches the band, and then on top of everything that Bodie and D'Angelo was saying, particularly D'Angelo could have caught the plate to the band, but didn't. Bubbles does.
Yes.
So yeah, he's my MVP.
No, I have no quarrel with that whatsoever.
But Lester's a good one as well, of course.
Bubbles definitely. He did own every scene. He gives up important information. Identifies who did I put the red hat on? Bodie, which is going to come up. That's going to be something. So I have to gotta give him credit for that. Teaching Signet how to be a fiend. Like that, schooling him on that. And basically calling, and also calling out McNulty for like, yep, you was cheating. He was cheating. I've been there and done that. You was cheating, but so Bubbles is a smart dude who could have been anything. I mean, if his life wouldn't have got hooked on drugs, and that's why I think in the brilliance of this show, they're going to show characters who could have been like, who knows, business owners and stuff like that, and how intelligent some of these characters are, and how layered some of these characters are. Great episode. It really moved things along. This was a big episode, a big shift in terms of this season in regards to where the direction that this was going to go. Next week, of course, we'll be back for episode 4, Old Cases, which has another iconic scene. Kind of tease that a bit. We'll be back for it'll be episode 4, Old Cases, and start to flesh out some more details. As it kind of feels like we like the detail, add piece by piece, and you watch episode by episode how it adds up in terms of some of the things that you've forgotten over the course of the years that we over the course of how many times we've watched these episodes. So looking forward to that. As always, thanks, Robert Sapp, for joining me.
All right, Surreal. Have a great rest of your evening. Happy Easter again.
Happy Easter to all.